Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to do a video with double inking. Hope you enjoy. So I started by using an anti-static bag on my piece of paper, which is 5 by 7, and then using some VersaFine Onyx Black, I stamped the Tree of Wisdom from Lavinia stamps, and I stamped that in the middle of my card. Now this ink takes a little bit longer to dry, so it's perfect for when you want to do heat embossing. So once that's stamped on my card front, I'm going to use some clear embossing powder and cover the entire image and then heat set that. And as you heat the clear embossing powder, you can see the image come to life. Now once that's completely melted, I'm going to use a Copic marker and color in the tree. And I just used one color here. I didn't add any shading and colored in all the branches. Now once that's colored in, I'm going to use my anti-static powder again. And now I'm going to use my Versamark pen. And I'm just going to ink over the brown areas of the tree. And I did this in several steps. And then I'm going to heat emboss it. So basically, I'm protecting the areas that I've already colored with the brown Copic marker. Now I'm going to go back and color in the other parts of the tree that I missed the first time. And it's easier to see this in real life. And then I'll add clear embossing powder on those areas and heat set them. So now the entire tree will be masked so that when we add ink on the background, the tree will remain brown. So I'm just using the circle mask to decide where I want the moon to go. And once I've decided, I'm going to use the inside piece and mask off that area while I add ink onto the background. So I'm going to use some distress inks for this, and I'm going to start adding ink on the bottom. And as you can see, as I add ink over the tree, the area that we have used the clear embossing powder on resists the ink. So I don't need to worry about getting ink on the tree. Now I decided to go in a bit of a rainbow here, and only the grass will show in the finished card. The rest of this will just peek through with that double inking technique. Now one of the great things about this technique is that you don't need to be an expert at blending the colors together. So I'm just putting the colors down and I'm not worrying too much about blending them because they will be colored up and only little bits of these colors peeking through. You don't have to have a perfect gradient between the colors. So I'm just going to finish my rainbow at the top of the card here, and I'm just being careful to make sure that I'm holding that mask down as I apply the ink around the area. You could always use a bit of washi tape or double-sided tape and temporarily tape this down if you would like it to be a bit more secure, but it's easy enough to hold down with one hand. Now once I've finished adding my rainbow on the background, I'm going to remove that mask and dry the background with my heat tool. Now once this is completely dry, I'm going to use the other mask, that's the outside one, and add some ink onto the moon to make it come to life. And again, this ink will repel from the tree, so you don't need to worry about adding ink on top of the tree. Now I noticed that my moon was a little off center there, so I'm just going to adjust the mask and add more ink. Now once I'm happy with the background, I can start the second half of the inking process. So using the Mystic Swirl, I'm going to stamp this over the background area. And I have my mask on at this point so that there is no ink that's going to end up on top of that tree. And I want this swirl to stretch across the rainbow colors so that they will peek through. So I'm going to stamp it once on either side and then rotate the stamp and stamp it again in the sky. And that way we will see all of the rainbow colors. And if you work quickly, you can do this all without heat embossing, as you have a bit of playtime with that VersaFine ink. Now, to get the most of this technique, you really want to make sure that you're stamping over all of those colors so they peek through. So now I'm going to remove that mask and apply the clear embossing powder over all of those mystic swirls. And then I will heat set them with my heat gun. Now I prefer to heat from the back, and that way I don't have to worry about the embossing powder flying. So once that's finished, I'm going to apply that circle mask again. And then I'm going to apply the acetate Hill mask from Lavinia. And then using some black soot distress ink, I'm going to ink over all of those rainbow colors, except for the green that's masked off at the bottom. And as the ink is applied, you can see it resists those mystic swirls, and you get that beautiful rainbow double inking technique. Just gorgeous. Now you could always substitute black soot distress oxide for distress ink if you prefer, but I find that using the distress inks underneath the embossing powder is key to having that bright contrast of colors. It's very effective in real life. So now I'm just going to remove the mask, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment. And I used my stamp platformer for this because I wanted to stamp with several different colors. So I used a combination of distress oxides and just did some partial inking. So I stamped a little bit of the sentiment with each color, and I held the ink pads on a slight angle and just repeated this until I had stamped the entire sentiment. Now this is probably best to do with a stamp platformer, and that will allow you to stamp more than once so that you can have a nice dark image for your sentiment. So I'm going to continue adding distress oxides until my sentiment is finished. And then I'm going to clean off my sentiment stamp and use some VersaFine ink, and then re-stamp this with the clear sticky ink, and then use my clear embossing powder on top. Then I'll heat set this, and you can see those rainbow colors really pop now. And then once that's set, I'm going to use the same black soot distress ink and cover the entire sentiment with it. And then once I'm happy with that, I can trim my sentiment for the front of the card. Now to add a bit more color on the inside of the card, I'm just going to use the same distress oxide colors and partially stamp that mystic swirl. And I'll just stamp that on the inside of my card blank. You could always add a couple of these if you prefer, but I intended to write a lot in the inside of this card. Now once I'm happy with that, I can put everything together. So I just trimmed the card so that it is now a little bit smaller than 5 by 7, so that I have a nice white border around the edge. I'm going to glue that in place, and then I'm going to add some foam squares on my sentiment just to pop it up on the front of the card. And I'm just going to add that sentiment at the bottom. And now you can see the finished card. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!